America is a Christian country. It started out as a Christian country. However, the founding fathers added to its framework, to its constitution, to its way of being, that church and state should be separate and religious freedom should exist so that anyone could worship in any way that they wanted. Now, being a Christian country, it was split up into mostly Christian denominations with pastors and priests and Catholicism with the Pope. But there were no uh, words like guru or mentor. There were no specific uh, people you went to in order to find your own way. You just went to the local parish priest or the local minister. In the late 60s, early 70s, there came an influx of Indian spiritual teachers into America. And it happened in two ways. One, the rock groups who were incredibly influential with the young people as to what they did and what they took part in began going to India and finding teachers, and some came to the United States. While I was in law school, I spent more time reading esoteric literature than I spent reading law books. And one thing that kept cropping up in this literature was that when you're ready for a teacher will arrive for you. And interestingly enough, in March of 1972, I got a few phone calls that said there's a teacher in Philadelphia. And I was intrigued. I didn't know how to react. So I packed up my wife and one kid, and we drove to Philadelphia, which is about a 70-mile ride. And we came to his little house. And he lived in what is called a row house in Philadelphia. Row houses are like townhouses, except they're not fancy. They're just one after the other, very plain. They fill up the block, and they're capable of housing lots of people. So we were invited in, and we were told he was upstairs, and he'd be ready for us in a moment. Uh, we had one kid then. He ran upstairs and ran back down. And when he came down, he said, "You won't believe it. He looks exactly like his picture." And so we were brought up into his room, and he was sitting in a little bed. It was a tiny room, and we all sat on the floor, including my wife. And there was a small 12-inch black and white television in the room that was playing Star Trek without sound. And he began to talk. And there was a translator because he spoke a language called Tamil, which I was not familiar with, nor was I familiar with the fact that there existed a province in India called Tamil, nor was I familiar with the fact that many Tamils lived in a little country, island, off the coast of southern India called Ceylon, that later became Sri Lanka. He spoke to us about many things, most of which I've forgotten. But I do remember that I had a question for him. And the question, I had just become a lawyer. I had been practicing for about less than a year, maybe a year. And I saw that the ethics of being a lawyer could be easily uh, overridden by imperfect impulses to get things done in the way you wanted to get them done. And I wanted to talk to him about that and how one could maintain their integrity and be a lawyer simultaneously. I mean, you've all heard the stories about lawyers being sharks. His response was to me that it was possible, that maintaining your integrity is maintaining your integrity and not allowing other things to interfere with your integrity. And this is a very important point. Integrity is maintained because you wish to maintain it. Integrity is maintained because you've concluded that you're going to maintain it and you're not going to go beyond the bounds of integrity. You're not going to allow the pulls of the world, the pulls of greed, the pulls of economic success take you in other directions. You're going to do things straight. And you do things straight because you want to. And there are no excuses. You can't say temptation was strong. It doesn't work. All that works is your belief system that integrity exists and it's your responsibility to have integrity in your own life. While he was answering this question, which I hadn't asked, but which I wanted to ask, my wife looks at him and she walks right up to him and says, Bawa, can I read your palm? Now, my wife read palms back then, and it was sort of a parlor trick or a hobby or something that she had learned. And Bao looked at her and smiled and held his hand out for her to look at. And she looked at his hand. Her head bobbed down, kissed his hand. She started to cry and she ran out of the room. I was just sitting there, basking in the glow of the fact that for the first time in my life, I had run into somebody who had answers to real questions and who didn't beat around the bush with the answers and who didn't try to give you answers to satisfy you as opposed to satisfying the truth. A bit of time passed, and somebody said to me, shouldn't you go see how your wife is doing? And it came to me, yeah, that's a good idea. Maybe I should go see how my wife is doing. So I went downstairs And there was a little porch on this townhome. And she was about 25 years old, I think. And she was standing in the corner of the porch, crying still. And I said to her, "What's wrong?" And she looked at me and she said, "He has a double lifeline." A double lifeline is something you never see. It means somebody who knows themselves. So he's different than anybody I've ever run into, anybody I've ever met, and any hand that I've ever seen. As a matter of fact, he's beyond ordinary imagination, and I'm not quite sure what or who he is. So I brought her back upstairs. We sat down, and then he had a meeting in the living room at about 7ish or so. We went down into the meeting and listened to him give a formal talk to a formal audience. Afterwards, my wife said to me that the room filled with light for her, and as she sat there with this room just glowing from his presence, she began to understand that she was in the presence of something extraordinary. And we wrapped up the night and went home. We came back at the next formal meeting, the next opportunity we had, and he gave another formal talk. I don't remember what it was about, but after the talk, he called me up with my wife, and he said to me, "You will be the president of South Jersey." I didn't quite understand what that meant, but what it meant was I was supposed to lead meetings in South Jersey. Well, here we are. I had met him not one day, but maybe 3 or 4 days ago. And now he wants me leading meetings, teaching his teachings. And as he said, "You're going to be president of South Jersey," my wife, who has a lot of insight, said, "He gave you a title so you wouldn't leave. He wanted you to stay. So he gave you a title to bind you to this place." Well, for whatever reason he gave it to me, he did. And I became Bao's lawyer. And I handled a lot of things in the beginning. The first one was we moved the fellowship moved from the townhouse to a big house on a place called Overbrook Avenue in Philadelphia. It was a synagogue that was no longer open, and we bought the synagogue and made it into our fellowship house. It also had rooms in it. It was actually one of these large 6-bedroom houses where the downstairs had been converted into a meeting room, and the upstairs was still bedrooms. And one of the bedrooms became his, and that's where he lived. And there was enough room to put about 15 or 20 fellowship people into the house, and the house became crowded with people. So there were people always there. Anyway, we made a deal to buy the house, and we bought it. Then he came to me and said, "Now that we have a house, we have to have a cemetery. We have to have a place where we can bury people. And you have to find us a place where we can do this." So we went looking, and I found a 40-acre plot of land in Jersey. And we went before the planning board of that municipality to see how they would react. And I bought a bunch of his books, spread them out to people, and told them that we were looking for a cemetery. We had found a residence, And at that time, you may or may not remember, or you heard about it. There was a man called Jim Jones who had a cult, I think it was in Guyana, whose followers all killed themselves. And it was a big to do, a very big scandal. And these people were certainly not familiar with gurus, not familiar with teachers from the Far East. And they said to me, "Are you like the Jim Jones people?" And I thought, oh my boy, God, I'm not going to get very far here. This isn't going to work at all. So I went back to Bawa and I told him it wasn't going to work there because of their attitude and they probably weren't going to give us anything they wanted. And he told me, we don't want to be anywhere where they don't want us to be. Keep looking. Then with Chuck, we found some land in a place called East Fallowfield Township, Pennsylvania. East Fallowfield Township is in Chester County, and that's where the Mazar is presently. And when I went to them and explained to them that I needed a cemetery for our organization, they were very open to the idea, and they did not question me at all about who we were or what we were about. If you need a cemetery in a religious organization, you should have one. And this comes from Pennsylvania having a long history of religious ecumenicalism due to its Quaker founding. So that was the next step. We bought land in Chester County. Then some of you may or may not remember Rosine Sally. Rosine heard that there was 50 acres adjacent to the little fellowship farm plot that we bought, and he suggested that we buy it. And so we put together 10 people and bought an additional 50 acres. So now the fellowship had about 100 acres. Then Bawa said, you should get approval for housing for the people on this property. And everybody who contributed money should be able to get a lot. Well, not everybody who contributed money wanted a lot. And we were given a really terrible, terrible time by the municipality as far as getting approvals for this land. They did not want Muslims among them. And trying to explain the difference between ecumenical, peaceful Sufism and other forms of Islam was not something that fell on ears that were ready to listen. So we kept going back and going back and going back and getting turned down. Finally, we sued them. And for those of you who know, we finally got 23 30,000 square foot lots in one portion of the farm, and houses are beginning to be built now. So his idea has finally hit fruition, and there will be additional buildings there, including a mosque. While we were doing this, at the same time, in about 1976, he had decided, or it was decided amongst the group, that we should get him a green card, which would make it easier for him to come in and out of the United States. And because he used to travel back and forth between the United States and Sri Lanka. So we made application through immigration lawyers to get him his green card. The day came for his hearing, and the night before, I got a call from one of the translators, Manny, Bawa wants you here tomorrow morning to take him for his interview. And I didn't ask any questions. I just said to my wife, we have to clean the car. And we cleaned the car. I drove down the next morning. I picked him up along with two translators. I had a little Opel, I mean a tiny car, and we went to the hearing. And the hearing took place in a room where a man was sitting behind a desk, and he had a list of questions that he asked. And before he did that, I had brought a group of Bawa's books and showed him Bawa's books and said that he was a religious teacher, and this application was made on his behalf by his followers who are studying his teachings. And because of their closeness to him, they wanted to get him a green card so that it would be easy for him to be in the United States and we wouldn't have to go through all of these visa applications over and over and over. So the man began to ask his questions, and there were about 20 questions, and each one of them was a yes or no answer. And one of the translators was translating on his behalf. And the man would ask the question, the translator would translate the question and then say yes or no, whichever was appropriate, until the final question. And the final question was, are you now, or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? And Bawa gave a 15-minute answer. And the translator said, no. And the guy said, thank you. He sent us home. And we got in the car. And I asked the translator, whose name was Ajwad Marker, I said to him, what was that all about? And he said, Bawa explained to him that communism, at its essence, was godless. And how could he, a man of God, who teaches about God, be in favor or join communism? Communism is a great danger for the world because it removes God from society. And you can't remove God from society and maintain a blessed culture, maintain a blessed society. I got a lot out of that because when I was young, in college, I was an economics major, and they taught you a number of courses in Marx, Engels philosophy. And the professors were very enthusiastic about it. Being young and stupid, we were also enthusiastic about it. And I remember when I was about 28 or so, I came to him and said, is it okay to buy a house? Because all of this stuff about having private property had entered into my psyche. And he laughed at me. And he said, not only is it okay, you better hurry up because they're only going to get more expensive. And for any of you who followed the housing market for the last 50 years, what used to cost 40,000 is now 500. And what used to cost 300,000 is now $1.5 million or 2 million. But anyway, so I bought a house. I learned some lessons from that. And the lessons that I learned from that is that Bawa wanted you to be independent. He didn't want you to rely on others for your maintenance or sustenance, except God. And he wanted you to be able to take care of yourself. He didn't want you to enter into a situation where you relied on others to carry the burden of your being. Um, when I was about 31, maybe a little younger. We had the same situation again. I was working in a law firm, and I did not like the people I was working with. I had been with good people, but then they merged, and I ended up with a supervising lawyer who was a jerk. And I wrote to Bawa and told him about this. And they had just built a new office building, and we were in this new office building. And Bawa wrote me back, and there were a number of things in the letter. He was in Sri Lanka at the time. But the summation is, he said, leave. It's better to live in your own rat hole than in somebody else's castle. Again, this theme of self-reliance, this theme of you have to do the best you can to take care of yourself and not relying on others came up. Now, I had one child and I had no money at the time. But the guru said, leave. So I left. And within a year, I was making more money than I was being paid at the office. And things began to climb steadily thereafter. Things began to get better. Being with Bawa, being with a true teacher, being with a teacher who has no expectations from you other than you learning about and becoming closer to God is an extraordinary experience. God is love. God runs the entire universe through love, and he runs it through a divine, unconditional love that is beyond what humans usually partake in. Humans usually deal in what I call transactional love. I'll love you if you give me something. I'll love you if you do something for me. But to get beyond that point into non-transactional love, into divine love, takes a change in the physical-based human nature that we're all involved in. Takes us to another level of existence. And this comes in a number of ways. One way is it can come when you're married to somebody for an extended period of time. I'm talking 30, 40, 50 years or more, where you have been kind to each other consistently all that time, and you're now at the place where you assume kindness, you assume proper action, you assume love to be available for you at every moment. And it gives you this great sense of comfort so that you can love back without condition. You can love back without any transaction in the interaction between you, because the love between the two of you has become so pure, so long lasting, so overwhelming, so consistent that you are capable of now loving without fear. And one of the things that stops love is fear. Fear of rejection, fear of not being loved back. But when the relationship is that solid, that fear goes away. Another way this happens is the relationship between the sheikh and the disciple. the sheikh is consistently loving towards you. Under all circumstances, the sheikh is consistently giving non-transactional love. He's not asking for anything back. Bawa never asked for money. Bawa never asked to be compensated for what he did for us under any kind of circumstances. What that kind of love does for you, and what that kind of love does for everyone, is it creates a sense of contentment that is hard to rock. Most people are traveling through this world and they encounter consistent difficulty. They can encounter consistent situations that are problematic towards them and problematic in their lives. And this situation creates fear. This fear happens because faith has become weakened because of an unresolved situation and a belief that the situation can't be resolved. Worrying is feeling fear for unresolved situations that you don't know the answer to. So this limbo area where you don't know if it's yes or no, without faith, becomes very tenuous for you, and you become afraid. The sheikh is able to make you unafraid because of his love and his faith. And when you plug into his love and his faith, you know everything will be all right. But if you can't plug in to his love and his faith, you stay outside of that realm of contentment. You stay outside of that realm of everything being all right. That realm is not available to you because you don't make yourself available to it. So as you hold back, so fear grows. As you hold back, anxiety grows. As you surrender and believe the words of the Sheikh, and believe that God is merciful, and believe that God will work things out, then no matter what happens, no matter what you see, no matter what occurs within your world, you know things will be turned around in time, and you will develop the patience to allow that time to happen so that you can be found in the correct place. But this takes effort on our part and a belief system that holds steady to the Sheikh's words and doesn't leave that which has been pronounced for us. We can turn our own world upside down by making wrong moves. But if we allow God's moves to be the moves that we encounter, that we use, then everything will go as planned. It's said that there is man's plan and there is God's plan. And God's plan is better than man's plan. And man is full of doubt and full of criticism. This doubt and criticism destroy the ability to be locked in to God's plan because they break the belief system of faith. And we can't break the belief system of faith. We have to believe that there is an overriding, stronger reality that is here for us than anything we can imagine. And this is the part that's difficult. We are constantly imagining. The mind is a constant critic, and it's constantly imagining. If we can turn down our imagination and turn up our faith, our anxiety will decrease, and our difficulty with the situations we have will decrease. Also, we have a limited number of solutions to problems. We think A and B requires a C. Well, for God, it's not like that. God has an unending number of solutions to problems. And if we allow Him to be the arbiter of how problems are resolved, as opposed to thinking that we ourselves have to resolve every problem, then in that case, things will change for us. So there needs to be an alteration in who we are. There needs to be an alteration in our thought patterns. People sometimes ask me, but if your mind keeps telling you this, how are you supposed to ignore it? And I say to them, is there anyone in your life who you constantly ignore? Like your mother? And everybody smiles and says yes. And my response is, well, treat your mind like an overbearing mother who won't give up and has her own way of looking things, and you know that they're wrong. You have to be able to do that. You have to be able to create a stability outside of the way that you think. You have to allow your mind to do what it does, yet you do what's real. Schizophrenia, one of the things about schizophrenia, is you listen to everything your mind says. The wise person filters what the mind says and doesn't do everything the mind says. We need to filter our mind. We need to filter our thoughts. We need to filter our ideas. And we need to have faith, determination, and certitude that God knows best for us and that God is on our side. Rumi, in one of his quatrains, said, treat the world like it's rigged in your favor. Understand that. Everything has been set up for you to succeed, but don't stop your own success through doubt. Don't stop your own success by losing faith. Increase your success. Increase your truth by coming closer and closer and closer to the true belief in God that the Sheikh has, and the true belief in God that nothing can take you from that space. When Bawa was in the final years of his life, he was very ill. He never complained. He never said anything negative about his creator. He was constantly positive about the truth, with the understanding that what he was going through had nothing to do with God's reality, and this too shall pass. And there was a king who heard that there was a special ring, that if you had this ring, it would solve all your problems. And people kept coming with various rings with various stones, and nothing helped him. Then this beggar came in, and he said, I have something for the king. And they didn't want to let him in because he was a beggar. Then finally one of the ministers says, look, he had all these high positioned people, none of them helped him, maybe he can help him. So he came up to the king, and he gave him this ring. And inside the ring there were no jewels, but it was printed, this too shall pass. And so it is. This world shall pass. Our attachment to this world shall pass. All of our troubles and anxieties within this world will disappear, whether we allow it or not. Understand your limited options. So your option is either make the most out of your life and be content, or be full of anxiety and wait for God to take you, because he's going to. He takes us all. So allow us, God, to be strong in our faith. Allow us, God, to be strong in our belief in you and in the belief that everything is going to turn out correctly and that everything is going to lead towards your truth and lead towards your contentment, your peace, your surrender, your judgment, your way of being, your Rahman and your Rahim. Bring it so that that's who we become, the ones who truly believe, the ones who are truly there for you, and you are there for us, and that we find the true faith and the truth that you have for each and every one of us. May it be so. Ameen. Ameen. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.